Well, my name is Dr. Jessica Tartaro. I work as an intimacy coach and connection facilitator up here in the Pacific Northwest. And today I have the immense pleasure of interviewing author, mentor, and I would say foremother, Dr. Susan Campbell, who is the author of 11 books and most recently a book that we'll be talking about today, From Triggered to Tranquil. The subtitle, How Self-Compassion and Mindful Presence Can Transform Relationship Conflicts and Heal Childhood Wounds. That pretty much encapsulates so much of the work I do as an intimacy coach. So it is such a joy to be with you and explore this really important work. Welcome, Dr. Campbell.
Thank you.
So I'm going to say just a little bit about who you are. And then I'd love if you could give an overview of the book for anyone who's maybe not familiar with just the concept. What we're going to do during this interview is try to get to some particular angles or topics that I've asked Susan, can we focus on this? Okay, so this is me getting to kind of be curious out loud together, and hopefully the people listening will get a lot out of this too. I have a feeling anyone who tunes into making intimacy a practice, you say authentic relating a practice, will find this valuable. Okay, so a little bit about Dr. Campbell. As I said, she is the author of 11 books on relationships and conflict resolution. She leads seminars globally, internationally, has appeared on CNN's Newsnight and Good Morning America. Dr. Campbell has also directed a think tank, run nonprofit organizations, consulted to Fortune 500 companies, and guest lectured at the Harvard, Stanford, and UCLA business schools. She works with, in addition to all of that, that doesn't say that, I'm adding that. In addition to all of that, she works with private clients through her relationship coaching practice and lives in Sonoma County, California. Okay, so we're both on the West Coast here. The last thing I'll say by way of an introduction is that I personally got to hear Dr. Campbell speak for the first time in 2017. We were still gathering in those days, and I was at the Relational Leadership Summit in Boulder, Colorado, a very special year. And I'm pretty sure, now tell me if I'm wrong, that I heard your talk on triggers, couples working with triggers, and I bet that was part of what became this book. And one of the things that has meant so much to me, I had a feeling, was that your work is so concrete and immediately applicable. You're so good at giving action steps for how to take these big concepts and use them. And I have really modeled my work after that because I feel it's so important. So with that, I wonder, Susan, if you'd be willing to share just kind of like an overview of the book to get us started.
Yes. So this book is called From Triggered to Tranquil. And the basic idea is learning how to take any upset that occurs with your partner or with yourself even, so because sometimes your mind chatter triggers you. So, we often trigger ourselves, but how to take any moment of upset and work with that to do inner work. So it really is a deep introduction, deep but introductory, I think, to inner work, which is what do you do when you're hurting to get yourself, and when you're triggered, you're not just hurting, your behavior becomes kind of rigid. You don't really see all your options. You're in some version of fight, flight, freeze. You're on automatic. So a lot of us go into those states when we don't even realize it. So my work is about helping people who either get triggered a lot or don't even know you get triggered. First, own up to the fact that most everybody does get triggered. And so I help people see why that's a useful thing, even though some of us feel a lot of shame when it happens. How you can learn to process those emotional reactions more efficiently and get back to an intimate, more flowing conversation rather than that, oh, I can't say that, or, oh, he just said that, so that must mean that. Those are all the kinds of things that create rigid, reactive responses instead of what I like to think of as a flow of life where something comes up, I talk about it. You say something, I really take it in. That's what a secure relationship looks like. So I help people get from insecure functioning to secure functioning. And there's 5 steps of trigger work. First, acceptance, and that's a big one. So I have a chapter on each of the 5 steps. Acceptance, knowing your trigger signature, which means knowing the early warning signs that you're starting to get triggered, so you don't go down that hole too fast and too quickly. You can actually pause. So that's the 3rd step, is pausing to self-calm, self-regulate, and offer yourself some self-compassion. And so then the next step is being with sensations and emotions in a way that's healing. And then the final step is repair. If you've made a mess with somebody, you have to go back and clean it up. And so I give, like you said, specific tools, specific scripts, even like, here's how to do a good repair so you don't wind up falling back into defensiveness like so many people do. They call it processing, but they're really just explaining themselves all over again. That is not reparative. So I show people how to do a vulnerable, connected repair. So that's the 5 steps of trigger work. Then the second half of the book looks at applications to these 5 steps, to your intimate relationships, to your relationships between parents and children, friends. I got 2 chapters on groups, one when you're a group member and get triggered, and one when you're a group leader and people or somebody gets triggered in your group. And then finally, the most challenging chapter to write was what to do when you get triggered by the world situation. So I tried to really cover it all in this book, and it's kind of a small book. So I'm very proud of that. Every book that I write gets simpler and simpler.
Which is the advanced practice.
Yeah.
It's really harder to do. It's harder to find the essence of it. Okay, you just said so much that I want to ask about, but I'm going to jump to that last piece because it's really standing out.
Mm-hmm.
Why was that last chapter, the one about being triggered by the world, the hardest to write?
Well, mainly when we are triggered by something that's going on in the world, like injustice, or let's say people in power enabling bad actors to keep bad acting, those kinds of things, they are in our minds so wrong, and this right wrong thinking, there really is injustice in the world. There really are imbalances in terms of equal rights for all people and so forth. So it's very hard to own that and work with that as a trigger. And what I do in the last chapter is I don't want to get across the idea that if you're angry about an injustice, that it's just your trigger. I show people how to work first with your reaction as a possible trigger. First, go into it and really explore all the nooks and crannies of where that comes from and where the meaning of that injustice comes from. For example, you had an autocratic father, and so now you're triggered by government overreach around the COVID vaccine, let's say. Now, I've done some programs on that are now on YouTube. It's a good idea if you're going to be an effective activist, for example, because I know that's one of your interests, to clear yourself and make yourself much more spacious and not in this blaming place. You're wrong, I'm going to cut you off as soon as you start to say something that I think is untrue. If you're going to influence somebody or be a leader of some activist organization, I've been working some with Extinction Rebellion, for example, the young people mostly in Europe. And if you're going to be effective, you need to have all your marbles, you need to have all your wits about you and not be in a triggered state where you can't listen to somebody whose point of view differs from your own. So that's part of it. that's part of it, is the reason it's difficult to write it in a way. I wanted to write it in a way that says, yes, there is injustice in the world, but you're better off checking in with where your outrage is coming from, so that your genuine caring and passion can fuel your communication rather than your trigger reaction. You're wrong, you're an idiot, cutting people off, that sort of thing. Just, that doesn't work.
Beautiful, powerful point.
Hmm.
We jump straight to the gold uh, with that one. What I'm hearing is how hard you worked to make the nuances clear there, that you're not saying that working for social justice change is about being triggered. It's about something that is very real, and it is served best when we're untriggered, or we have all our marbles. I like that. That's an official clinical term. Um, yes.
With me.
Yes, I'm with you. But so that the action, so our intervention, so our advocacy in the world can be effective.
Yeah.
Yeah, I hear that loud and clear. And there's so much to this. I feel like being able to work through this book, we're someone to pick up this book and really work through it. There's the potential for a lot of liberation. When I think of triggers, I think of being kind of caged, really limited, really stuck, potentially very afraid to move in the world lest I hit another trigger, and so on.
Yes.
And earlier you were saying, some people can get very embarrassed or ashamed. I would certainly say I can. If I feel like I'm not at my best, or there goes my stress response again. And one of the things I hear you say is, it's in the first page, everyone gets triggered. Well, you technically said most everyone. I was like, I wonder who's in the other, that sliver. But let's say there's people who, for the most part, don't. But most everyone does, right? Can we raise our hands, everyone in this room who gets triggered? That's you too, right? That's both of us.
Yeah, I do this favorite fears, and I've been doing this for 20 years, favorite fears contest in audiences. And I'll say, how many people have, you just kind of know you have a fear of rejection. Almost everybody raises their hand. Fear of abandonment, fear of being controlled, fear of being invisible, misunderstood, et cetera. There's like about 15 basic
Totally.
fears that motivate a trigger reaction.
Right. Normalize them.
Yeah.
That most people, I think, have hidden in the corner back in the recesses, the psyche. You go, hey, let's take a poll.
Yeah. Let's take a poll. Hey, look around. You're not alone. And that is another reason I wrote this book, to help people realize you are not alone. And I hope that'll help with the shame. And then once I explain the brain science behind trigger reactions, we all got the same brain that has the amygdala that can get hijacked by unexpected things that perhaps don't bring out your best.
That's a kind way of putting it. You said, and you said this in the book too, but you said it earlier, it's useful. Triggers are actually useful. Not only are they something to be ashamed of, there's utility or use. Can you speak to that more?
Yeah. I'm really trying to sell this point, because we do have a big prejudice against going into automatic reactions and saying things we wish we hadn't said. So that's a given. That's an unfortunate reality, but that's the reality that most of us live in. So given that, if I know how to work with, there's a contraction in my chest, there's a fear that I shouldn't say what I want, for example. Like a lot of people think trigger reactions are yelling and slamming doors, name calling. No, I broaden that out way farther, because most people's trigger reactions are more like shutting down and afraid to speak, or at least not being able to speak their full range. So you're afraid to ask for what you want. And just in that moment, you're not, you're not, that there's something wrong. You just, you're not all there. And you may not realize it until afterwards that you didn't ask for what you want. But whenever you begin to realize it, whether it's in the moment or 5 minutes or a day later, you go, oh, geez, why didn't you just say blah, blah, blah? You take that moment, you bring that moment back. So this is what trigger work is. You bring the memory of that moment back. And then you do some breathing practices, some grounding awareness practices to open up a bigger space and calm your nervous system. Because what we're starting to do here is activate the witness. And that's not something that many people yet know how to do. But doing this practice actually helps you, because you do certain things like, imagining that this part of you is a much loved child, or seeing the scene on a screen. I've got different practices that will help you get a little separation with a compassion while witnessing. And so starting there, then when you be with, and that's another term that a lot of people have no idea, what does that mean? But I show people, right, as you're reading the book, you're being with yourself, you're recalling, then you're feeling, a body sensation, a thought, and then pretty soon childhood memories or memories of an old relationship that perhaps was traumatic. So those are the kind of things that start to bubble up as you're ready. And I teach people how to self-regulate all along the way so it doesn't get overwhelming. But these actually are practices that people can learn from reading my book, because I've gotten feedback. It's so wonderful. I've gotten feedback that people are getting it just from reading.
How gratifying. It's what you're saying, being able to cultivate the witness inside, able to be with the arising, thoughts and feelings. They really are seemingly advanced or abstract concepts. So I can imagine how gratifying it is to see that you have broken them down for people who might never be able to afford seeing a therapist, or wouldn't ever feel comfortable. There's still a lot of reticence or stigma, but essentially what they're getting is high quality therapeutic content in this learning. So what I'm hearing is, it's like when you can bring back the reflection, the exercise that you teach, when you can bring back the knowledge, there's a shift that can happen in one's self-awareness. That means you can move forward into the world less triggerable. Is that what you're getting at?
Yeah, the ultimate aim here is to get a more friendly, compassionate relationship with emotional pain. I mean, we can't blame ourselves or anybody for wanting to avoid emotional pain, but when you dip down in small doses into these painful places where you shut down your ability to feel or move the energy when you were little because it wasn't safe, so you froze, or you got into some kind of patterned way of coping with the big people who weren't always attuned to you. So people learn through this practice, dip gradually into, oh, that's painful, but I can hold it. Oh, and now the next time I'm triggered, I'll dip into that same pain again. Sometimes trigger work looks like the same thing over and over and over, but it has to be repeated enough so that you go, oh, I'm familiar with this place. I'm familiar with this painful place, and I know what to do. I know how to care for myself when I'm hurting, and I don't have to blame anybody else for it. So that the ultimate thing is to be able to take I call it the normal pains of adult relationships, to be able to take those in stride.
Beautiful. And I see the way you're showing like a rise and fall. There's a little bit of a hilliness, but we're not crashing down and breaking down and lighting fires and so on. Okay, so you really just encapsulated what we're aiming for, to be able to have a friendly relationship with emotional pain. Makes me think of grief work there. The ability to feel and not go away.
Yeah. There is grief work in this work. It gets you there.
Yes, which is, from my perspective, such a a liberating practice. I've used that word now a couple times, but there's freedom. If I can stay with the pain, then I'm not limited from what I can lean into in life. And it circles back around to me to then there's more of us available to helping the world at large.
Exactly. That's where I'm really headed, is culture change.
Yes.
If we aren't able to manage, our own reactivity with one another, it's very hard to cooperate to solve the complex problems that we're facing today.
Indeed. Beautiful. Well, I'm glad to hear you share that vision. I wanted to circle back around. All of this is so rich, and I see that you are suggesting a lot of self-responsibility in this practice.
Mhm.
I work with a lot of couples, and I love doing couples work because it gets so deep so fast.
Mhm.
And I hear you saying, especially in the chapter on couples,
Mhm.
that the work for the individual who is triggered is to go into their personal trigger. I think this is maybe called the repair work, if I've got that right. And to do the tending and to do the soothing and to do the being with and to cultivate and sit in the witness.
Mhm.
And then come back to the partner and say, look what I found. Okay.
Yeah, yeah,
Very different than the idea that my partner needs to soothe that part or calm that part or heal that part for me. And there's parallels in all sorts of ways. I'd love for you to speak to that if possible.
yeah. Well, I, if you have a need for somebody to soothe you, and you can access that need, could you give me a hug? Could you reassure me that we're okay? That's in the flow. See, but it's when people can't speak about their needs or can't ask or can't clear the air in I'll just use the word again, a flowing way, a secure communication way. They're already triggered. Oh, you didn't notice that I was sitting here by myself, no one talking to me for 2 hours. What's wrong with you? That's the wrong way to ask for what you want. But I do honor people's interdependence and need for connection and need for each other. I want you to go there first. If somebody can help you with your pain, ask for help. But see, that's what people can't seem to do. It's called co-regulation or asking for co-regulation. And right before this book, I wrote another book about triggering, all for couples. And it talks about all the different, conversations you need to have to know how to co-regulate your partner and teaching each other how you like to treat each other, like you like to be treated and so forth. But this book does emphasize a little bit more, just because the culture, I think, needs it, is we go too quick to blaming our partner for not doing it right for us. And when we're triggered, we can't effectively ask for what we want. And what we need is to soften all that. The inner trigger work softens your relationship to that painful reaction, like my partner ignored me for 2 hours. And when you're more soft and tender toward your own pain, you seems to automatically happen that you have more compassion when you go back and talk to your partner about your needs. It's like I have more self-compassion. I just have, well, first of all, I'm more spacious because I'm not blaming, but I tend to have more compassion for, oh, he's a different type of creature than I am, and so forth. So here's the shorthand is, when you can get what you want from your partner, great. But when you can't get what you want, then you need the self-soothing and the self-regulation and those tools.
Incredible distillation of that very important nuance. I hear you. Yes, co-regulation. We wouldn't be Homo sapiens without it. We are certainly wired for connection. And you say it so nicely. You talk about the couple is like a herd, and the herd, like a herd of cattle or gazelles, we impact each other. One runs and the rest of us follow. I thought that was such a great image. And so it's not that we're responsible somehow for ourselves inside of a couple in some isolated way. but it's like this iterative process where maybe we can get support from them, from which to have more compassion for ourselves, from which to have
Like your partner, don't expect your partner to be very good at co-regulating when you're yelling at them and blaming them.
oh my gosh,
You know what I mean? And that happens all too often.
all too often. It's the slide so far away from what we want. Yes. Well, you make it so clear. In the triggered state, our options are limited. We're rigid. We can't think straight. It's so funny, this Zoom background feature, by the way, it kind of reminds me of that. We can't see the rest of the picture.
Yeah.
It's so just, we're so single focused. So this blaming you for not giving me what I want makes it so much harder for the couple to, or the partner to give me what I want.
Yeah.
So coming back to self.
Mhm.
Softening something, right? As you say that, my whole body softens, softening inside, soft. And then trying again with that greater feeling of spaciousness, right? You talk about relationship, relating as a practice, and I certainly do too. And I think we're not set up very well in our culture to make relationships last, because it seems that they should just click into place and just coast, right? Rather than being something that needs ongoing tending. Yeah.
That's right. When I was writing the book, The Couple's Journey, back in the late 70s, and that's a book about relationship as a spiritual practice. I was married, and I used to say to people and to my husband, who occasionally co-led with me, I'd say relationship is a discipline. And he hated that, because he wanted to be more romantic about it. And I just had to say that to people so they would get that, discipline pays off in terms of pleasure. But if you expect it's going to be somewhat of a discipline, I think you'll be better off.
Agreed. We need to reclaim discipline, like discipline is sexy. Somehow.
Well, one of my teachers, Albert Ellis, said, he's the guy who founded rational emotive therapy. He used to say, discipline is another word for long-range hedonism.
Oh, interesting.
Not good. I mean, basically, he's saying in order to really have the maximum pleasure in your life, because he was definitely a hedonist.
Oh, that's fantastic. It's just the opposite of the expectation that it's more about austerity or deprivation. No, it's the recipe to have what you want over time.
Yeah.
Yeah. Bravo. Thank you. I love knowing that Albert Ellis was one of your mentors. Yeah, amazing. We're going to close shortly, but this last curiosity is I guess a bit more personal. You clearly are steeped, in the 70s when I was born, you were writing these books. Like, wow, puts it in perspective. You've been so steeped in helping the world repair relationships.
Mm-hmm.
I wonder if there is a personal reason or angle or kind of investment in this book. If there was any sort of you can tell us about what was in here for you personally that led to this book.
Well, I was kind of naive about triggers, actually. My parents had a great marriage. I mean, they did have differences, and they did actually have conflict in front of us kids. But they dealt with it in a mature way. They were very unusual. I realized that because then I've been married 4 times, Jessica. And so I didn't realize about triggers until I started getting married at age 21. And, I stopped getting married at age 50. So I had 4 in there. But my own relationship struggles were more like, I'm pretty secure. I come from a pretty secure family. My brothers and I are like really close friends. There was no rivalry. And so I was like kind of a naive adult. Even though I had a PhD in psychology, I think my unconscious, and then it became conscious, but my unconscious and then conscious motive to pursue this whole field was, Susan, you're so shallow and superficial. And, you're attracted to all these deep wounded men, and I knew about Carl Jung and, the shadow and opposites. I know, and I made up a whole thing about why opposites attract, because his shadow is what I need to learn to manifest. And so I just started going for the pain, like getting more into the value of pain, because I had not had much of that. I've had a pretty easy life. I mean, you could say 4 divorces, that must be painful. Not really. I was friendly with all my partners. We parted friends. We're extremely close, except for the 2 who have now died. So anyway, my personal thing came out of my own naivete in the beginning. And then for this book, having been a couples therapist for 55 years, I see how many people, it's not just a couples, a therapist, how many people beat themselves up when they do have trigger reactions. And I wanted to help take some of the shame out of it by writing this book and saying, there's a utility to these things that you think are your worst qualities.
Wow. Oh, that's such healing balm. I'm receiving it myself, and I'm imagining so many people who are going to tune into this and heave a sigh of relief to hear that from you. Thank you, especially for telling me a bit about the arc of your story. I love knowing how unusual your parents were and how you went in to adulthood with what you called a naivete. I didn't know you'd been married 4 times. Yes, I would have guessed that four divorces in, there would be maybe a lot of strife. I hear it was amicable. But what I'm getting is that you learn to go into the pain and learn from it and through it. And that wizened you.
Yes.
Yes. Well, thank you for leading the way, bravely leading the way down that path. Is there that last piece was so beautiful, but I want to hear any final thoughts or, anything that you recommend for people to, for finding you, or, obviously they can order the book and I will include those links under this post, but any final, words for those who are listening?
Well, you're going to make mistakes. So I'll just say that you're going to make mistakes, and just this book and so many others like it show you what to do when you make a mess. Because really, if everybody tried to be perfect, like all these self-help books, show you can be, I just kind of want to temper that a little bit. Yes, you want to do it right, but these practices, there's going to be a trial and error process as you learn to do these things, especially if you're doing them with another person. Doing them by yourself is quite a bit easier, I think. So I want to just say, be patient and forgive yourself over and over and over. And you will notice evolution eventually.
Wise words. Thank you so much for your time, for writing this book, for sharing these insights. And I do strongly encourage everyone who's tuning in to this interview to get a copy of this book. I think it would be great to read it together. Maybe we can start some groups up here locally to keep us connected and to do some of this work. I'm grateful to know you, Susan. Thank you so much again.
Thank you.